Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Clock Talk with Dr. Greg Brannon. Greg, how are you today?
Fantastic, Jim.
So, today we're going to talk about adrenal fatigue. And remember, 15 minutes on everything you need to know on adrenal fatigue. So, to get started in a very simple way for our audience, what is it?
Simple way. I think that's hilarious when you say that every single time because it is complex, but we try to make it do simple, right? So we talk about this all the time, Jim, but we have the brain has two major parts that controls the rest of our body's function. You have the hypothalamus, which sits above the anterior pituitary, and there's this thing called releasing hormones that release these hormones at a frequency and amplitude that will tell you which hormones to turn on. The hormones that are being turned on from the pituitary do certain functions. FSH and LH do sperm and egg. Growth hormone does growth hormone. Thyroid does thyroid. In this particular case, it's called ACTH, and that turns the adrenal glands on. The adrenal glands are very important. They are basically for metabolism, immune system, blood sugar, flight or fight. But I'm going to get the adrenal gland anatomy. They're about a ½ inch by 3 inches. They're like a little triangle shaped tissue that sits on top of each kidney. All right. You have two areas. You have the medulla, which is the center, and you have the cortex, which is the outside. The medulla is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. Flight or fight, things happen. You increase epinephrine and norepinephrine, adrenal gland. That's what it does. Adrenal gland, that's the adrenaline comes from that. So that is a nervous supplied one. Then you have the cortex, has three sections of that cortex: the outer, the middle, and the inner. And they're called zona glomerulus, zona folliculitis, and zona reticularis. And they make certain hormones that do certain functions. But these are increased under stress, and they do certain things. We're going to focus on the middle layer in a minute. But the first one is the zona glomerulus. That secretes a thing called aldactone, which is a mineralocorticoid. It has to do with your blood pressure. Okay, very important. It's called the renin-angiotensin system. Vasoconstricts and dilates your blood vessels. The next one is your zona follicularis, which makes a thing called glucocorticoid. Cortisol under stress goes up. And the third one, the reticularis, makes androgens, DHEA. Now, the catecholamines, or the adrenal ones, that is a different type of steroid. That's catecholamine, a peptide steroid, a neurotransmitter. The other three I mentioned are all based on steroid. Our brand, it's actually those four rings right there. That's a steroid precursor. So what happens is when the body talks on these symptoms, when everything's working well, those levels stay in a certain range. We'll go over a graph in a minute, but they have a certain range you want to be in, and they change. The big one to focus on is cortisol. Cortisol, by the way, is the only hormone that actually increases with age. In acute stages, acute stress, rapid cortisol is life-saving. Blood pressure, breathing, sugar metabolism. Chronically, when you deplete that reserve is when problems happen.
So then so I understand this all comes from the adrenal gland,
Yeah.
But when you have adrenal fatigue, what will the patient experience?
Beautiful. So back to our two parts of the adrenal. You have the medulla, that's out to the side, that's gone. We're going to be focused on the cortex, and specifically the second part of it. And that's where the cortisol goes up. So what do you feel when that reserve is running out? Naturally, when you sleep, before you go to bed, your cortisol and DHE are at its lowest. When you sleep, your brain is cleaning out all these proteins, all this called the glymphatic system. We start with the trash, all the garbage. So when you wake up to start your day, your cortisol is at its highest. And then over the day, it goes down. It's being used. Beautiful system. We'll go over a graph in a minute. So what you feel is when your reserve comes out, there's basically 4 stages of this insufficiency. All right? But how do you test for it? Before we go to show, we're going to show you a test for it. You can draw a cortisol with your blood. But they've been studies to show just putting the needle into the vein to draw the blood out increases your cortisol level. So how can I do it in a way that's not stimulating to your flight or fight? It's saliva. Testing saliva is not a flight or fight maneuver like a needle come to your body. And you saliva, you can produce because you need to get a curve. If you just get 1 point in time, it means nothing. Get 2 points, it's a straight line. You want a curve. So we get 4 different saliva tests. Let's go to the next graph. Let's show what that shows at. So the one over there is adrenal fatigue. This is the actual, that's my handwriting. This is the actual how it comes from the lab. And so what it is you have normal, which is not on the graph here. It's the normal is the line. You wake up in the morning, it's higher around noon. It peaks, it goes down. Beautiful. So low cortisol, tired, brain fog. It almost overlaps with low T a little bit because they work synergistically with that. With thyroid, testosterone, adrenals. What I try to explain to people is when your adrenals are responding if your thyroid and testosterone are off. So if your thyroid and testosterone are off, this will be off. When you get the thyroid and testosterone optimal, that will go back to its normal range. It's a reactive way, but sometimes it doesn't. So what you do is we'll check 4 saliva tests during a day, and we'll get these points in time. One is you have low cortisol throughout the day. You start lower, you stay lower. 2A is where you have low cortisol and low DHEA. DHEA, don't forget, that's the steroid one because that converts into androgen in your body as well. It's another source of androgen. Then 2B is a very unique one, Jim, is where you start off low, you peak, you go, wait, you have a nadir in the morning, but before you go to bed, you spike again. So you have trouble sleeping. And then the third one is they're all turned off. Your cortisol, you're down to 0. And that's where you have to rebuild it. And that's what we're going to talk about in the treatment plan in a moment.
Okay, so when we're in stage 2A, B, and 3, I don't know why they just don't do 1, 2, 3, 4. What's causing it? Why
well, 2A and 2B was my decision because if you look at 2A and 2B, they're like at the beginning, but the peak, the thing is that they're low, but that spike before you go to bed. So the 2B differs from 2A is that you're tired before you go to bed with 2A. With 2B, you're wired before you go to bed. So therefore, it's a different treatment plan. So the treatment plan is to take stress off of the adrenals, let them rehabilitate to produce the cortisol steroids they need. So then when they're ready for stress, because the problem is these are chronically producing. The reserve is chronically pushing stuff out, has no time to rest. That's the sleeping part. So therefore, based upon that, we have a treatment plan on both of those. So what I did was...
Well, before we get into that, so what causes this though?
Okay.
Where does the body get out of whack?
Okay, so since it's based for basal metabolism, so your metabolism is out of whack. This is compensating for your thyroid being out of whack, your diet being out of whack, your low T being out of whack, your sleep patterns. When I was an OBGYN, I was 2B all the time. All the time.
So we're back to
lifestyle
that we talked about with low testosterone in the past and everything else. Yes. It's
100%.
Life, it's food, it's diet, it's plastics, it's the whole works.
The 2B one is also big on people who computers before the bed without a blue screen. They're that watching TV before that. There's debate if it's the blue light wave or just your brain being stimulated. There's a great book called Circadian Rhythm, talks about sleep patterns, but you do not want your peak before you go to bed. So you're trying to do is how can you keep your adrenal glands to allow them to still do their job, but yet have time to rest. And that's where adaptogens, sleep, proper food, proper hormones help.
All right. So now we can move on to treatment.
Okay, treatment. So again, it's important to listen to the symptoms. And since there's a cross-reactivity with hypothyroidism and hypogonadism, low testosterone with this, I try to look at it in a systemic way. I first look at the thyroid and I look at the testosterone, sex hormones first. I don't go to this test first because if I did, it might be abnormal, but I know why it's abnormal. It's abnormal because the thyroid's out of whack and the hormones out of whack. So let's just do systematically. Let's get the thyroid optimal, get the hormones optimal. And then if I tell people with symptoms of the same, being tired, brain fog, lethargic, or just their job in general, like I'll use my job as an OB, is their adrenals are still pushing the hilt every day. Then I get a saliva test. Shows me their pattern, and based upon their at, I know where they're low in, and then I can rehabilitate that based upon where they're at.
So how do we do that?
First, I look at stage 1 first. It sounds crazy and like how simple it is, but it's a nice multivitamin. D3, melatonin before you go to bed. Melatonin is the number 1 free scavenger of radicals, or free radicals our body makes. It helps you get a nice sleep pattern. It's made from tryptophan, which becomes melatonin.
All right, real quick on melatonin. I heard if you take too much of it, then it makes you not sleep.
It depends on what dose. Optimally between 500 micrograms to 3 milligrams.
All right, then back up a little bit further too. Multivitamin, you're talking about specific multivitamins,
A nice
not
organic
the ones you
natural.
buy in a
100%.
All right.
You want to get a nice organic natural vitamin that goes with that, because ideally, if you have a great food supply, grass-fed beef, free-range chicken, organic vegetables, and a good topsoil, we should have our selenium, our iodine, our zinc in it. We don't. That's the problem, right? So get a nice multivitamin, melatonin, and then they call adaptols. That has things like holy basil, magnolia, ashwagandha. We've heard about those things. The medical term is called adaptogens. What they do is they allow the adrenal gland to do its function, at the same time rest and rebuild the capacity to make the cortisol it needs. Those are the big ones. That's what we do for stage 1. Stage 2, we're low on DHA, but that's from this third zone. So what you do is want to give the precursor to androgens, that's DHEA, and then what we do is we give that to help build up that level, and then we also will add that to that. Okay, same type of pattern. 2B is the one that's very interesting. I want something to happen where I want to lower your cortisol before bed. So I change from adaptol to androl. That has now, besides having the adaptogens in it, it actually has some glandular adrenal glands in it, some glandular from cows. And there's some molecules in there that help supplement the adrenal gland to do its function. But then I also give a thing called L-theanine before bed, which also will calm you down before you go to bed. L-theanine is a calmer, so that's what we do in stage 2B. Stage 3, you're making norcortisol at all. So you give Cortef. You actually give a medication for 3 months. So since the adrenal gland, you give all the supplementation we're doing to allow it to have rest, sleep, repair, regenerate its cell processes. Then you got to give it, but at 3 months, you can't be on it forever. You got to wean yourself off, and then we do another saliva test to see if we recouped, and then we take it off the medication.
I mean, usually if you're not making DHEA at all, or cortisol, then that medication will kickstart the adrenal gland again?
What it does is the adaptol supplements is jump-starting the adrenal gland, but you have the hormone there to do its job while it's being built. So I'm giving another source of energy. So since the adrenal gland is not making DHEA while it's resting, I'll give you oral supplements.
All right. So is this similar or not similar to Armour and Synthroid for thyroid?
Interesting. The answer is no, because your thyroid is not making T1, T2, T3, T4. So I got to supplement that. We've seen with the adrenals that when they're stressed to the hilt, there's still a capability, if given rest, can actually restart their mechanism of making it. Now, I'm being hesitant because there are cases when you give selenium and iodine and zinc and vitamin B and C's to the thyroid gland, in and of itself, that could get you back in normal ranges without medication. So for those that have the ability to regenerate, yes, it's identical. For those that can't regenerate, then you can't, because there's diseases, Jim, where you have a completely turned off of the adrenal gland. That's called Addison syndrome. You can't make any, so you got to be on medication forever. Cushing's is an overproduction. Picture John Kennedy, the president. He had very bad back pain back then. They gave high doses of cortisol. So you have the humpback, the fat buildup on that, a round face, the moon face. That's all from too much cortisol. But that is usually a medication or a hyperplasia from the adrenal gland that's making too much on its own. It's not a cancer. It can be a cancer, but it's usually hyperplasia. But it's usually medication.
Okay. So we talked about supplements and treatments and what have you, and some of the simple techniques around sleep. You know, some people I know, they'll take a shower half an hour before they go to bed. You talked before about not watching TV or, on your computer or whatever. So what are some of the simple things from a physical activity standpoint to sleep that one could do to prepare
I love
themselves?
what you said about that. Yeah, there's a lot of studies showing yellow light before you go to bed, red light, yellow light, get rid of the blue light, turn off computers hours beforehand, dark rooms. Somebody actually showed reading a book with that red light or yellow light has helped. Tryptophan. You have a turkey meal, you pass out, tryptophan turns into serotonin.
It's usually the alcohol with the turkey.
Yeah, but tryptophan can do that. Augment melatonin. But simple things is work on sleep hygiene. That's number one, sleep hygiene.
That sounds great. As always, 15 minutes, packed full of information. Thank you, Dr. Brannon.